back, just like that. And Ryan, you've switched seats.
I have. I got close to you.
Got a new guest here too. Welcome back to the AWS Developer Innovation Day. I'm Abe Grabelny, a developer advocate here at AWS, one of your hosts, joined with...
My name is Farrah Campbell, and I'm the head of the modern compute community here at AWS.
And most importantly, our two guests. Please introduce yourself.
Ryan Bachman. I'm a DevOps specialist SA here at AWS.
Yeah, I'm Sirirat Komdi. I'm a solution architect working in the worldwide public sector federal financial team.
All right. So now we just did a bunch with Brian around Code Catalyst and using one of the blueprints. We're going to get a little bit deeper, right?
Yep.
We're going to get a little bit deeper. We're going to start. I promised, I teased our audience because our audience was talking about their love for CDK.
Love CDK.
And their new growing love for Code Catalyst.
Yep.
And I said, if you like Code Catalyst
Bring them together.
and you like CDK, you're never going to believe what's up
That's right.
next.
right.
And we're here.
That's it.
So we're going to talk CDK, but before we get into it, we have not talked CDK on the show yet today.
Okay.
Too much. Do we want to just give a quick overview of why CDK, what it is, what superpowers it grants me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, CDK, and you'll find CDK is the foundation of a lot of our blueprints in Code Catalyst. But CDK is an open source software development framework that allows you to write your application code as well as your AWS services, your infrastructure, your resources in AWS in a common language that you're familiar with, right? So if you compare that with something like CloudFormation, where it's a declarative, it's JSON and YAML. CDK is kind of an abstraction layer on top of that, which synthesizes down to CloudFormation. But you're programming in, if you're a Python developer, you're using Python. If you're using TypeScript, you use TypeScript. It allows you to interact with that code, and again, in a familiar space.
So pick a language, any language.
Pick a language.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe not any language, but a lot of them, right? Yeah.
And then the other thing about CDK too is kind of the abstraction piece, right? If you look at a declarative language, you have to define everything to make up the resources. So CDK provides this construct level, which think of it as pattern libraries or construct libraries that hide the complexity of setting up some of our AWS services. So whether it's an S3 bucket that's set with encryption, or a Fargate service that has auto load a load balancer in front of it, CDK can pattern these in these constructs to kind of hide that complexity away from developers.
I have absolutely used that application load balanced Fargate service before. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's great, and I didn't have to write any of that CDK code at all. I just got to drop that in. There was one point where I had to actually drop out of that construct and do some more intricate setups. And the lines of code grew a lot when I was not able to use that construct. So I firsthand can say constructs, they save you a lot. They save you a lot of code, a lot of hassle, and a lot of those, searching around for the best practices, because they're already built into the construct. We're going to be building a construct today, yes?
Yeah, we're building the construct today, and the reason that we do that is exactly like that. We want to make it easy for developer to just, consume the best practices, right, and follow the guideline and compliance and rules. Especially where coming from a public sector, we have a lot of compliance. So we want to make it easy for developers to just download the construct and be able to use it and meet the non-functional requirement, and they just have to focus on the function requirement and business problems and things like that.
I love it. Yeah, because not every developer is going to be an expert in infrastructure, and vice versa, right? Your infrastructure engineers are not necessarily developers in the terms of working on the business logic, right? So there are companies that have this divide, right? And letting each team work and build things the way that they want to build them and then share is what we're all about.
Yeah, and then we're going to build the construct today, and the tool that we are going to use is Code Catalyst.
Oh, so it's Code Catalyst to build the construct,
That's it.
and then Code Catalyst to use the construct.
That's
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
I know the audience is saying, show me the code.
Show the code.
Yeah,
Let's get started.
Let's do it.
So I guess first thing we have to do is now we're going to show you how to build a construct in Code Catalyst. First thing we do is we're going to come to the Code Catalyst console and
Oh,
ooh,
look at that, live demos.
live
Of course. That's how you know it's live.
That's right.
Now, we've got some discussion here about Terraform and CDK. These two things actually work together now, too. I dropped a link in chat. If you're using Terraform, you can use CDK to generate Terraform as well.
Yeah. So yes, in here now, after we have the session, we are going to create a project, and we are going to use a blueprint. The blueprint that we are going to use is the one that here that is called CDK, right? So there, next. So I'm going to name the project construct example, and then we're going to, because we are going to deploy the construct library into AWS account, we have to also select the AWS account and also IAM role. We are going to build a construct library today, so that's what we're going to choose. And now we have to provide the code artifact domain. All the library that we are going to create today are going to live in the code artifact domain, so we have to provide that information. Typically, right, if your organization has a bunch of developers using different language, you can choose to build a library in different language. But today, since we are the Python shop, Ryan is going to code in Python. We're going to just choose the Python library, and we have to name this one. I'm going to choose Apache 2.0 as the license and put my name in there.
And some of this input to the blueprint configuration, CDK has a CLI tool that helps scaffold projects for you. So you can do this from the terminal. But there's other things that we're doing here, such as connecting to a code repository to store the produced code artifact. We're configuring JSII, which is an open source tool that helps us create these code bindings in these various languages. So the blueprint takes advantage of the CDK CLI, but it also puts around it, different utilities and configuration that kind of extends the CLI's capability to set you up a project.
Nice.
Yeah. The blueprint create the project's files, right, and in the repository, and you can see that the files that is created here. Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about the?
Yeah, so and kind of like going back to the blueprint input. So you can see some of the input that we put into the blueprint is reflected here in our package file. Stuff like the package name, the target. So Siri chose Python, and so you can kind of see Python is going to be produced from this, as well as the name and email, which is all required by the JSII tool as we build.
Question from chat: will it do a JSII construct so it can transpile to all the libraries?
Yeah, that's what we're doing here. So you see, we selected Python, and after the construct is built, I'm going to go and write an application using her construct in a different language than
Python.
In Python.
In
Nice.
Python, yes. And on top of that is also create the workflow, right, to deploy our construct into the code artifact. So that's one workflow running. Now, it's a coding time. So to do that, right, we have to have a place to do some coding there. So we're going to create the dev environment. In this case, we are going to use Cloud9, choosing the same repository. It's going to just create the environment there. It'll take a few minutes for Cloud9 to come up, but this is a very convenient way. If you don't have the IDE on your machine, you can always use the Cloud9, which is the IDE on the browser.
Or if you want to test a new one, get bored with one you're using, maybe.
You never know. You never know.
So now we have the code in the Cloud9. Going to just copy. We already have the code stages.
So not only can you, consume the AWS constructs as we're seeing, obviously you can consume constructs built by your own team. There's even community built
Yeah.
constructs, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ryan, as we're getting things set up?
Yeah, so we have a construct hub that the community that publishes these constructs to NPM, we kind of scan that on a daily basis, and you can find various community-driven constructs that are published publicly. But there's a lot of organizations too that want to build their own private constructs, codifying architectural patterns that the organization uses, tagging conventions that the company requires, security encryption standards that are required for governance and compliance reason. So a lot of organizations want to build their own private constructs with their own conventions, and then reuse them or enable their service teams to adopt them using CDK and CDK constructs.
Very nice.
Yep.
Yeah, so this construct, basically what we build is the API gateway with the Lambda integration. And also we want to make sure, right, developer is using the X-ray as a observability. So we put that in the construct. We want to make sure that our resources are tagged, so we also put that in the construct there. I installed the dependency. Now let's see if it's built. So before we deployed it, just want to make sure that things are working as expected.
It is live coding.
It is live coding.
Live coding. You never know what's going to happen.
So you want to talk about what is doing?
Yeah, and
well?
you can see here that the JSI was running. And this is one of the things that you don't get right out of the gate using the CDK CLI. Is it, by default, it doesn't have JSI configured to kind of cross-compile to these languages. So this blueprint enables that, and you can kind of see here that she's just testing that these will build, and now she's going to probably run a package to make sure that she can actually build those packages. And because we selected Python, you should see some output about it installing Python dependencies, and then eventually producing that wheel package that you can install with pip or twine or what have you.
You had me at NPM. You lost me at pip and twine.
Sorry.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm a newcomer to Python.
Yeah. But I mean, so right, like that's the power of these dev files. I know we talk about dev files is there's all these package managers and build tools and frameworks and so just set it up in the dev file and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
That's the beauty.
Yep.
So I'm gonna check in my code.
And as we said, no need to configure Git credentials.
No.
How much do you hate doing that?
Yeah. You don't even have to think about it.
No. Oh, can we make the browser font size a little bit bigger?
Maybe.
Is that?
I don't think so.
I don't know. It's okay if not.
Let's see.
There we go.
Look at that.
Perfect.
Live.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay.
And that's why she's the expert.
NPM.
We've got some
version.
Python love in the chat for you, Ryan.
Oh, thank you so much.
But also some TypeScript love, too,
Oh,
from me
okay.
over here. Do you have a favorite language? That's such a pointed question to ask. You don't have to answer that.
I would be Python. That's what I got started off
Okay.
using, so
All
it's
right.
Python. Yeah.
Fair.
So, okay, almost there. So
Right.
now we should be, let me double check. So now we up the version of the package into version 2. Now I'm going to really check in this.
We got a question from Chad about CDK. Is the CDK stateless? Which might be a bit of a complex question to go through.
Yeah, I mean, the way I like to think of it is CDK is really imperative abstraction on top of CloudFormation. So
Right.
what you write imperative code in CDK, and then there's a synthesis process, and the CDK CLI will take care of that, and it's going to synthesize down to valid CloudFormation. And ultimately, that's what we use to deploy our applications and resources in AWS.
And running updates to a stack also goes through CloudFormation as well.
Yeah,
So,
and
like,
it
in
creates
terms
this
of the
change.
state,
Yep,
right?
creates this change set. So it's going to validate, right? Like this is the difference that I synthesize. It'll kind of output. Here's the changes before you apply. Yep.
Yep. So I push the code there. Now another workflow is running, it's building process, and hopefully it will publish it.
So we're not going to wait on it to publish. We're going to just trust that it will, and then I'm going to go in. And now
Cooking show.
Yeah, like right.
Yeah, cooking.
The oven, yeah.
It's actually cooking.
And I hope it's not done. Right?
We had one in the oven ready to roll out.
Hopefully nothing burns.
So Siri was the expert here, and I am just a dumb Python developer, and I know nothing about the cloud. I want to write my application code, but I want to conform to my organization's requirement. And so she produced a construct that's going to allow me to meet organization standards, but I can just focus on the development of applications.
What I can tell, Ryan, you're a very smart guy. Don't sell yourself short.
Yeah.
So similarly, I'm going to create a new project, and I'm using the same blueprint, right? So she used a blueprint to produce the construct. I'm going to use the same blueprint, but this time I'm going to choose different options within the blueprint, and it's going to set me up to actually build a CDK application. So I'm going to call it CDK app. Similarly, we need a role. We'll call this Ryan's app. And then I'll leave the application selection. And then I can go into the application configuration section. And this is where I can start, which language do I want to code my CDK application in here? Remember, we built a Python library, so I'm going to go ahead and select Python. And then just a couple other inputs, which allows me to configure or pull from the private code artifact repository that the construct got published to when she built hers.
Nice. And that was one of the things built in too that I don't know if we talked about this or not yet. You built in CORS support, right, into this construct. Was this, or what was the? Can we talk a little bit more about what the construct was that you built?
So it was this one we built with the API gateway, with the Lambda integration, and also the observability behind, with the observability built in. In this case, we use Extract to provide that observability and also the tagging functionality.
Nice.
So.
Okay.
But we can also, if we have some other requirements, such as, as you suggested, the security side, the core, the authorization, API authorization, and things like that, we can also build that in.
Yeah, these are all sometimes difficult things to figure out, especially as an organization enforcing the right, logging that you're using or observability tools that you're using, especially when it comes to security too, what are we doing?
Yeah.
We're doing JOT tokens, and what CORS domains are supported, all that stuff, and being able to build it into a construct, it seems really, really useful.
And, we don't need developer to have to figure it out that all the time, right? They have a bigger job to make sure that the website or the app is function. So we want them to not to have to worry about that.
Yep. All right, while you were just talking, I was just setting up my environment, right? So just like last time, we're going to use a dev environment here to complete my application coding. Remember, I am building a Python application with the construct that we just built. One of the first things I had to do is I did have to set my MD environment to talk to my linked account. So I went ahead and grabbed temporary tokens and I set that in my MDE. And the reason why I did that is so I can just validate that I can import that construct that we published. So we'll go ahead and look at that. So we'll go into my... and this is another thing that what we can do with blueprints. So while the CDK CLI provides certain functionality, stuff like connecting to a code artifact store or setting up pip is kind of outside the scope of CDK. So within the blueprint, we have the ability to provide these like helper utilities or these build scripts to help kind of set that up for you. So that's what I'm going to do here. And you can see here that now I'm successfully connected to the code artifact store. And then I'm going to go ahead and update my requirements file. And I think we called the package serverless. And we should be on version 2. And now I should be able to do a pip install. If I can.
I'm pretty impressed you knew version 2 offhand, but I guess you prepared for this.
Maybe.
Okay, all right. I would have had to look that up,
Yeah.
for sure.
And it found it.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
So the next thing I'll do is I'll actually build the application portion. So because this is a demo and I'm not going to code everything, I have some code here prepared. Oh, if I could type. And we'll quickly go in and take a look at that file. So if I go in here and look what I'm doing here, right, she produced this package called serverless, and it's going to help me set up a serverless application according to best practices. It's going to have tracing instrumented for me through X-ray. It's it's going to set up tagging for me. I don't have to worry about it. So with this, really, besides a couple imports, I really have one line of code, and I'm going to get all the infrastructure I need to support this particular application. The only thing that's left here is I have to supply actual working code. So I am a Python developer. I just want to focus on my code. So we just have to add some additional Lambda code here. So I'll go in here.
Or do you have to? Or could you just use Code Whisperer?
I'm
just saying.
We then make it a live demo. We should try. But so I'm going to go in here and create my necessarily folder. And then it's looking for app.py. And then we'll just do a simple return.
This is really cool because you could build your own library, and so you're not recreating the wheel every single time, and enforce organizational standards that you want to be.
Yep.
This is really cool.
Yeah, I kind of saw parallels. They're not in any way related, but I saw parallels between the blueprints in Code Catalyst, right? Doing the same kind of idea of taking all of this collected best practices and all the things you have to go and do and set up for a project in Code Catalyst. And then, to me, constructs are very similar in the intention there, right? Is that well, I need an API, and I'm not an expert with API Gateway, right? But we've got an API expert, or API Gateway expert on the team. She built it, right? And now I get to benefit off of all the best practices that you built into it.
And the blueprint also make it easy for me to build it as well. So it's all helping all of us.
Yeah.
Everything's
win-win.
connected.
Yeah, and blueprints will really get you so far, right? If you look at modern application, there's a million different permutations on, different messaging protocols and different buses and different data stores. And so when you think about, you can start with a blueprint, but then composability of these various components, presented by CDK just makes it a really powerful combination of tools. Yep.
Can't imagine the amount of time that saves too, just looking at best practices and trying to understand exactly how things need to be done. Yeah.
And it's green check mark.
Green check mark. Now this is from the previous deploy, but no, that's okay. Well, we'll come back and see if the real one worked. But while we wait for that to deploy, you can see each one of these actions. We have the ability to go in and kind of inspect what it's doing. So while it's doing the CDK, we can go into these actions and kind of see the various output logs that are associated. So if it doesn't go green and it becomes a red X, right, and we need to troubleshoot, Code Catalyst also provides, great tools in terms of debugging and understanding what went wrong.
Nice.
But yeah, let's see if we actually have a working. So if we go back to our workflows, hopefully there's a second green check mark.
I just want to clarify too for chat, there's a bit of a discussion about, API Gateway is not that difficult to use, et cetera. this can be as complex as you need it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
It isn't just for API gateway. You could, like we were talking earlier on about the application load balanced Fargate service. It's not the most complex use case, but it definitely has some complexities. You've got networking in there. You've got, to create all of the scale groups that get the ECS tasks and services added. Like, there's a lot to do there, right?
Yep.
And you don't have to do that.
Right.
You just use this construct that was built by
Yeah.
AWS, and you can make constructs to whatever complexity or simplicity that you want.
Yep.
Right.
And sometimes it's just about standards too, right?
Yeah.
Like, take a simple L2 construct that does an API gateway, which is a very simple thing, but add your tagging standards to that construct and then publish it. And now you enable your teams or your organizations to build to that standard.
And if you have to add like authorization, like you were saying, with the token, with the cognito, with the, all kind of security standard we have to do, and definitely it's become really large.
Yes. Yeah.
Construct.
For sure. How are we doing? We're getting close to time.
I don't know. Let's see if we get that green check mark. I'm going to refresh here and see. It was
did.
deploying.
I have faith.
Still deploying.
Still deploying. That's okay.
It's currently in progress.
Okay, in progress. That's all right. Maybe we could talk a little bit about where, we actually had a question earlier on before your session started. Is there a crash course for learning this stuff?
Yeah, so we're hosting, so there is. One, it's very friendly to use, so I encourage you to go to codecatalyst.aws to try it out for free, but we are also hosting a couple online immersion days and innovation days starting next week, where we're hosting and we're going to build something even cooler using Blueprint, Code Catalyst, and Code Whisper.
So this is just like a little taste.
Yep,
Yeah.
little taste.
Okay, all right. I don't know if we're going to get to see the finished build. This might be a bit of a cliffhanger for you two,
Yeah.
but we can update the chat later on what happened. I'll check in with you both later,
I like
because
it.
unfortunately we got to move to our next segment. But thank you both for coming on the show. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, yeah, thanks for your interest, and hopefully you go build something amazing.